I'm Idiotech, and this is my PC review of The Division. So a lot of the things I say in this review will be similar to the things I said in my coverage of the beta, as the game hasn't changed much between that time. However, for those of you who don't know, The Division is a third-person action RPG set in post-apocalyptic New York. As far as the gameplay goes, you'll spend most of your time in The Division shooting bullet-spongy enemies in the head until they drop dead and give you some loot. Now, being a lover of ARPGs myself, I was quite excited to get my hands on the final release of this title. The problem is, if you played this game during the beta, you've kind of played The Division, and the final product really doesn't have that much more to offer. So in this review, I'm going to talk about the pros, I'm going to talk about the cons, and then I'm going to give you my conclusion. So let's talk about the positives first. First of all, on PC, it's got a really solid options menu. We got colorblind options here all the way through to third-party support. We can turn on and off various elements of the UI, and the graphics options menu is extremely scalable. We also have access to benchmarking tools, so it's kind of the example of a perfect options menu in terms of PC gaming. It also has impressive visuals. This game is fantastic to look at. It's a wonderful recreation of New York City. The atmosphere here is fantastic. The lighting effects, the weather effects, the amount of clutter and just detail in this world is second to none. It's a very impressive game visually. The Division also features great sound design, excellent sound design, very punchy, reverby, impactful combat sounds, and the music is good as well. It's very 1980s, it's got a synth-ish sort of vibe to it, but it fits the theme really well, and it's ominous at times, which was a surprise. It's actually quite a dark game in some places, and the visuals as well as the sound design really help to add to that. Now when it comes to gameplay, we've got a very large map to explore. A lot of people were concerned about the size of the map initially because it was planned originally to be the whole of New York City, and it turns out we just get Manhattan, but I can tell you right now, that's more than enough. If this map was any bigger, I think it would hurt the game. There's already quite a lot of downtime as you walk from location to location, so I think having a bigger map than this would actually be bad for the game and not better. So I'm kind of glad with the current map size. I actually think it could do with being a touch smaller than it is. Base upgrades is a thing in this game. It's taken from many other RPGs over the years, but it's a nice thing to have. As you progress through the game, you earn more and more points to upgrade your tech wing, your medical wing, and your security wing, and as you do this, you gain access to new skills, perks, and abilities, but you also gain access to additional supplies, such as the ability to reroll stats, or a special weapons vendor, or a cache that gives you crafting materials every day. That's a nice addition. It gives you a reason to go out into the world to earn points, to come back, to upgrade your base. It's a nice reward loop, and I think it adds to the game. We also have Intel and Echoes. So Intel operates as basically an audio log, but it helps to add to the world building and add to the sense that this is a real place with real people and that things happened prior to the apocalypse, and it fills you in on some of the backstory. Echoes are kind of an extension of that. It's these recreations, these simulations of events that happened using cell phone data and audio recordings and things like that, and it gives you sort of a look back in time at an event that happened, and that's really nice as well, and it helps to fill out the world. Main missions in this game are exceptionally fun. I actually really enjoyed the main missions in this game, and I played almost all of them in co-op. It's a lot more fun in co-op. This game overall is more fun in co-op, but the main missions especially I found much more enjoyable when playing with other people. Not only were they harder, but they were also more tactical, and we had to work together and use our various abilities strategically to try and achieve our goals. Safe houses are a mechanic in this game. Basically, they're fast travel points, but they also allow you to restock on items, sell some gear, get access to new secondary missions, side missions, and encounters. Fast travel, but also you can team up with other players there, so that's a nice addition to the game, and it also serves to break up the map a little bit into sections. You know, you go to this section, it's level 1 to 2, you go to this section, it's level 5 to 6, so that's nice. It's kind of like an MMO in that way. But it's also good because it gives you a point of fast travel, and when you get into the later end of the game and you're jumping back and forth from one side of the map to the other, it's very welcome to have those fast travel points. The game also supports a very solid itemization system. It's not the best I've ever seen, but it's certainly better than Dragon Age Inquisition, for example. Most items have various stats on them, for example, so you can have firearms buffs or health buffs or electronics buffs, and they will affect your overall character abilities, and your damage, and your health, obviously. But also you have secondary weapon stats, and stats on mods, so that stuff's quite nice. You will be doing a lot of number stuff in this game. If you don't like number crunching and min-maxing, this really isn't the game for you. But also we have different bonuses on weapons, so say I have 450 points in firearms, I may get access to a secondary bonus on that weapon that does more headshot damage, for example. So the itemization in this game is actually quite solid. It's not as rewarding as games like Diablo, but it's certainly not bad either. Finally, the combat. Now, the combat in this game is very stat-focused. If you have a more powerful gun, you'll do more damage and you'll down enemies faster. However, that doesn't mean the game lacks strategy and depth, especially in co-op. You'll have to use your various perks and talents and abilities in synergy with other players to stay alive, and that's quite good. You also have secondary items such as bullets that will explode or bullets that will do fire damage, and you can use those periodically or use buffs, for example, to increase your damage against elite enemies. There's a fair amount of things to think about. You'll certainly not be turning your brain off during combat, and that's a very good thing, because ARPGs tend to get a little mindless as they go on, and the Division requires you to be engaged at all times if you want to stay alive, especially on the harder difficulty modes, such as challenge modes and hard modes once you reach Endgame. So now we've talked about the good things, let's talk about the bad things. There are some major issues here when it comes to theme, story, and we'll get onto that as we progress through this section. First up though, let's talk about the story. It's pretty terrible, honestly. There's very little here in terms of story. There's some nice backstory, but there's not a lot in terms of the actual story and what you're there for and what your character motivation is. It's kind of just like, you're a Division agent, you solve problems, go solve the problem. What's the problem? Rioters. How do we solve it? Shoot them in the head. The story's non-existent. If you're coming into this game looking for a well-rounded, solid, well-written story, you're in the wrong place. The Division just does not offer a compelling or satisfying story experience at all. The voice acting in this game is not particularly great either, and the writing for those characters is also cheesy. A lot of the characters don't sound like human beings at all. They sound like terrible action movie characters. Story, voice acting, VO, it's not great. It's a major downside to the Division. Another issue is the bullet spongy enemies and the theme. Now, I talked about this during my beta coverage, and it stands. The bullet spongy enemies in this game just don't work with the theme. When I shoot a Space Marine in the head 50 times who's wearing tons of plated armor, it makes some amount of sense. I can suspend my disbelief a little bit there. When I'm shooting a guy who's wearing a hoodie and carrying a baseball bat 50 times in the head before he dies, I'm sorry, I find it incredibly difficult to suspend my disbelief. Now, you do slowly start to get used to that as you play the game, and the gameplay itself is fine, it's just the theme, it does not work with the gameplay on offer here, and it's a real negative point for the Division. Another problem is the limited character creation system. You can pick from a number of faces and hairstyles, and that's about it. As a result, you tend to run into people in-game who look pretty much identical to you a lot of the time, and that's immersion breaking. Again, it's a result of the theme. The theme doesn't allow for creative character customization, so you don't get much of it. Now, it could have been nice to have some facial modification system in there, you know, being able to change the shape of the nose and the eyes and the ears and the lips and things like that. They could have added that. They chose not to. The game is extremely demanding when it comes to its hardware requirements. I did make a video on this. I have a GTX 980, an i7 4790K, and 16GB of RAM. I cannot maintain 60 FPS on ultra settings in this title. If you want to max this game out, you're going to need a 980 Ti or equivalent or above, and to me that seems unreasonable. Having to spend $1,200 to max a game out and get 60 FPS, I don't think that's reasonable. Other people do. It's a matter of debate. But just be aware, it's extremely demanding when it comes to its hardware requirements. In terms of the visuals, it has been downgraded since its original presentation at E3. A lot of people don't like that, and I'm one of those people who tends to agree. False advertising is a big problem in this industry. I understand why it occurs. It's not always malicious or intentional, but in this case, the game does look pretty damn good anyway, so I can't hold it against them too much. Pop-in and texture streaming issues are a big deal in this game. If you lower the settings too much, you'll experience severe pop-in, and that's very jarring, and the texture streaming issues in this game are laughable at times. You'll walk up to a sign and stand there for like 30 seconds before it actually loads in and loads the high resolution textures, so there's some LOD streaming issues there that need to be addressed. The user interface in this game is still very cluttered. As I mentioned during my beta coverage of this title, it's still very, very cluttered, very noisy, hard to read. There's too much on the screen at any given time. I think it could have been handled in a more fluent and easily readable way. It's just not great, and the map as well is still an issue. When you go into the map, you're completely taken out of the game, you can't see anything going on around you, and so if you're in a PvP zone, that's a dangerous thing to do. Server instability is another problem. This was particularly bad on release, but it still hasn't been entirely addressed. Occasionally I will still get kicked out of the game because of disconnects, and that's very frustrating, especially if you're on your way to a location and you have to restart and do it all over again. I quit out of frustration a number of times due to server crashes, and that sucks, and it's an online service, and if I'm asked to be online all the time to play your game, your servers should try and be online all the time as well. The game also suffers from enemy variety issues. There are 4 factions in this game, you'll spend most of the game fighting 3 of them, and they're just human beings. You know, some of them shoot fire, some of them don't. They feel really similar to one another, and it's not interesting or exciting. Again, it's a problem with the theme. There are bugs in this game. Teleporting AI, falling through the world, not being able to shoot your gun. All of these issues still haven't been fixed from the beta. That's a problem, they need to be addressed. The crafting system in this game is very, very basic. It's as basic as it gets. Do you have the materials to craft the item? Yes, you do. Okay, you can craft it now. There's nothing interesting or compelling about that system, and it's actually useless until you get to the end game, so it would be nice to see them expand that with future updates. There are still large amounts of downtime between missions. There was a complaint during the beta that you'd spend a lot of time walking around with not much happening. Now, they have added some more enemies here and there to try and combat that. However, they tend to spawn in exactly the same location, so you know when you're going down this street, you're going to see these 2 guys standing there next to a fire truck, and it gets really repetitive really quickly, and I'd rather they weren't there and I could just teleport everywhere and fast travel to where I needed to go, because there's a lot of downtime. There's a lot of just walking around with not much happening, and that isn't fun. The game suffers from long loading screens and fast travel. Every time you fast travel, you have to sit through long loading screens, and every time you log into the game or join another party, you have to sit through loading screens, and they can take upwards of a minute. It's incredibly annoying, and I assume it's a result of the online connectivity of this title. The game also suffers from hit registration issues as well as lag. Now, this ties in with server stability, but lag is a big thing for me in this game. I will unload, say, half a clip on a guy and know it's going to kill him, and then have to wait an extra second after the bullets have gone out for him to actually register he's been hit and fall over dead. And I've gotten so used to that now that I actually fire enough bullets, just enough bullets to kill a guy, because I know it's going to kill him rather than unloading an extra couple of bullets into him because he hasn't actually dropped yet. That may just be an issue for me, it may be an issue for others, obviously it's just my experience, but there seems to be some hit registration issues as well as lag in this title. Poor weapon variety is another issue, and this also ties back to theme. We have LMGs, assault rifles, pistols, shotguns, SMGs, and sniper rifles. That's it. If you get a new sniper rifle, it's just got more damage numbers. It may have some bonus stats, but it's not very exciting. Again, if you have a lightning sword that kills everything in a 10-meter radius, that's a lot more exciting than a sniper rifle that does 2,000 damage instead of 1,990 damage. So, the weapons, the variety here, it's just a victim of the theme of this title, and the theme just does not work well with this type of game. It's not a bad game, it's just the theme massively drags down what it could have been. If it was slightly more futuristic, there could have been a lot more creativity here in terms of weapon design, enemy variety. It could have solved some of those immersion breaking issues. The theme, again, is a problem. Endgame. It's really limited right now. You can engage in hard mode versions of the missions you've already done, challenge mode versions of the missions you've already done, or go into the dark zone and kill a bunch of AI and shoot some players. That's it. You're just going to farm those things over and over and over again for a yellow sniper rifle that does slightly more damage than your previous yellow sniper rifle. It's not exciting, it's not engaging, it doesn't offer enough variety. This is something that needs to be fixed going forward, and I'm sure it will be 6 months to a year from now. Side missions and encounters in this game are extremely repetitive. After doing about 5 or 6 of them, I was just like, oh really? Is this all the game is going to be, just doing these over and over again? Yes, it is. And they're very repetitive. There's only about 4 or 5 different types of missions. One of them involves activating various consoles, the other one involves protecting a JTF officer, the other one involves rescuing a hostage. It's just the same thing over and over again with no story attached, and it's boring. Cosmetic item rewards in this game. It's nice they're there, they're just really boring. I've got an extra jacket that looks green now instead of slightly brown. This is not exciting, again, a result of the theme. Maybe it's for you, it's not for me. Let's talk about the Dark Zone now. So the Dark Zone is essentially a player versus player version of the single player content. I say single player, it's not really single player, it's co-op, but you get what I'm saying. You go into the Dark Zone, you have a different currency and a different level of XP. You earn Dark Zone currency and Dark Zone XP. You can spend that currency on items from the weapon shops. That's the difference. Now, you can kill players in the Dark Zone. There are other people there. You'll go around to different landmarks. You'll kill AI. You'll collect loot. You'll take it back to an extraction zone and you'll extract it. Other players can kill you for that loot. That's how the Dark Zone works. The problem is, and this is the problem I saw in the beta, people are afraid to kill each other because of the penalties for doing so. When you shoot someone, you get a timer on your head. Every time you shoot someone more, the timer goes up. you're penalized for engaging in PvP. As such, people tend not to do it. This system needs an overhaul because most of the time in the Dark Zone, I very rarely run into people actually engaging in PvP. Someone shot me once and then apologized and said, please don't shoot me, I didn't mean to. People want to work together in the Dark Zone to farm enemies as efficiently as possible so they can get the good loot in the Dark Zone without engaging in the PvP. That's a drastic failure of design, it needs to be addressed. Ubisoft have stated that they are working on fixes for that going forward, so hopefully those come out soon. The last issue I want to talk about here is hacking. Now, in my beta video, there was a lot of hacking at that time, and I addressed it. And I addressed my concerns regarding their ability to fix it in the time frame before release. Seems they didn't fix it, because there's still hackers on PC. It's not as rampant as it was before. It's still there, though. There are people who are invisible, people who have infinite reload, people who can run faster than everyone else. This is a problem, man. It's a competitive PvP environment. You can't have hackers. And apparently it's going to take them upwards of a month to implement a fix to try and deal with this. So what's my conclusion on The Division? Well, despite the theme failing to serve the gameplay, and I really do mean that, the theme is a big culprit here when it comes to the problems in regards to The Division, it's a competent ARPG. It's not groundbreaking in any way, it doesn't do anything particularly new that we haven't seen before, but it's well executed and it can be fun. However, it currently doesn't offer enough variety to keep me interested long term in the way that, say, Diablo or Warframe have. This is a service game. Going forward, they're going to add more and more content to this in the form of free updates and expansions. I would urge anyone still on the fence about this title to wait and see what they offer in 6 to 12 months. I think in 12 months, this game might actually be very fun and have enough content to justify the price point. But right now, after about 20-30 hours in the game, I don't want to play it anymore, and as such, I can't recommend it. If you found this video helpful or useful in some way, please let me know in the comments below, and if you disagree with something I said, feel free to let me know also. If you want to support the channel, please like, favorite, share, and subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time.